Hello, everybody. We're very happy to have you all here this evening. We welcome our special guest, Anthony Vega, who is the Lake County Clerk in Lake County, Illinois. And we've asked him to speak to us today about what we can expect at the election this year. So, Anthony, thank you so much for coming, and I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Really my pleasure to be here to talk about elections, one of my favorite subjects, and to join and to be with the League of Women Voters, whose work on civic engagement, for well over a century has been, I think a really good example of that civic engagement, partnerships of grassroots partnership with local government and local community groups. So thank you for all your work and all the work that you continue to do all across the county and across the state to strengthen our democracy. So thank you, Rosemary, for the invitation. From what I understand, we have people from far and wide, some folks from DuPage County, where my counterpart, Jean Kasmarek, is doing some really cool stuff. I see some people from Cook. I heard one person's from the Palos Orland Park area, which was near my old stomping grounds. I used to work at the Doubletree Hotel in Alsip, Illinois, when I was a teenager and in college, and so I know that area well. And so let's get right to it. We are back in another election cycle, the midterm election cycle, where we will elect on March 17th the party nominees for governor, for U.S. senator, for the constitutional officers for the state of Illinois, for the Democratic State Central Committee people, which are the party leaders, along with the nominees for the local offices, mainly county board, some of the county-wide offices as well, and obviously all the precinct committee people for both parties. And so our primary election is March 17th, 2026. And believe it or not, early voting is literally right around the corner. The first day to early vote is February 5th, 2026, at the Office of the Election Authority. So in downtown Waukegan, where I am at right now, we will have our early voting location where people can come in and vote in person. That is also the first date that we will send out vote by mail ballots to those that have signed up. Um, with countywide early voting starting March 2nd, which is 2 weeks before Election Day. So it's another election. We have these every year. So what's different? And so what's different is elections are rapidly changing. It seems, for a very long time, records elections didn't change. It took time. It was very stagnant. It was a routine. But since really 2018, 2016, 2018, the demands on election authorities have vastly shifted. The technology has shifted. The demands of the public have, I think, greatly increased. And so, what are we looking at as we head into 2026? So, what we as before we get into 2026, I do want to take a step back to highlight some of the work that Lake County's been able to do in 2024 and 2025 that set up the foundation for 2026. In 2024, one of the good examples of local government partnership that I'm really proud of is the fact that for the first time, my office partnered with the Lake County Emergency Management Agency and our local police departments on security. Mainly, what we saw, and one of the main reasons we were proactive, is we saw during that election cycle was that election authorities from across the country were getting fentanyl-laced mail sent to their offices, or mail that was laced with white substances. In most cases, it was fentanyl. In other cases, it was just a white powder that was meant to scare people. What we also saw in other states was the fact that actors who wanted to bring fear regarding vote by mail would try and sabotage the drop boxes for vote by mail. They would either, I think, one instance, set them on fire. They were able to put something inside that set ballots on fire. or they try to tamper with them. And so, our elections in our primary elections in Illinois are later than usual. So a lot of the examples that we were looking at in real time were happening much sooner, and which allowed us to prepare ahead of time. And so we proactively had, since my first election, actually, in the consolidated municipal election in 23, we started that dialogue with our local law enforcement, and we really enhanced that in 2024, where I started attending their once a year their Lake County Police Chiefs Association, where I have all the chiefs in one room for the most part. I'm able to talk to them about key election dates, and to reiterate some of the rules as they relates to elections. Because the reality is, if we don't prepare and engage with them early on, when something does happen at the polling site, a lot of the frontline deputies or law enforcement officers don't deal with violations of the Illinois Election Code on a daily basis. For many of them, this may be the first time they're encountering an election-related law enforcement question. And so part of our goal is to educate our local law enforcement on the rules involving polling sites, involving voter confidentiality, access to polling sites. And so that's something that was very proud of in the lead up to the 2024 primary. By the time the general hit, I had engaged with the Lake County Emergency Management Agency, and for the first time, the EMA, which is Emergency Management Agency, the Lake County EMA was actually activated at a level one activation level. What that means is they're monitoring, and they preemptively had um, set up a virtual space that if something were to happen, it would save us a lot of time. It would enable a whole of county response to whatever scenario we were having, versus something happening, having me start making phone calls and then responding after time has passed after that incident. This enabled us to have more of a seamless communication and coordination. So should something happen, we already had, preemptively, set up that virtual coordination space for a whole of county response. And that could mean literally as communicating with public works on generators for polling sites in case a polling site went out with power, talking with the critical ComEd partners for electricity, or other partners that we needed to coordinate. And so I'm really proud of that. I'm very proud that also it was very uneventful. It did give us an ability to practice for 2025, and obviously for this year, and we will continue that partnership. Because ultimately, I think what a lot of people are concerned about is election security, not just about the security or integrity of the actual election, but rather the safety and access to polling sites. And one of the main questions I've gotten over and over is what happens, what are the rules when it comes to access to polling sites for federal immigration enforcement? And what I can tell you right now is, we are in a lot of ways in a new era where a lot of scenarios have gone untested. But what I can also tell you is, we control the polling sites. We control up to 100 feet of the polling site entrance, and you've all seen that orange cone outside a polling site. That is in my world sacred ground. You're not supposed to have electioneering beyond that cone. We can control that. There's specific rules in the law as to who is authorized to be inside a polling site, and that is, authorized personnel, including authorized law enforcement personnel. The, the big question is obviously what happens if, in a moment of federal intervention, when they may be inside a polling site. And I think this is something that is still developing. We're still monitoring how this is going to play out in other early voting states, where obviously working at the state level with the Illinois State Board of Elections, with the security people at the state level, and we're looking at our counterparts across the country to see what tools we can have at our disposal to challenge that presence of federal immigration enforcement at the local level, should that get there. However, I will preface this. We only control the polling site in up to 100 feet from the entrance. Should other types of enforcement happen beyond those cones in the public right of way, that is unfortunately fair game. You see it yourselves when you go vote in person. If you go vote in person, you have candidates, you have their families, their supporters, you have campaign workers. Um, that area is fair game, and there's limited action that we can take in that regard, unless you have a component of a voters claiming, look, I'm feeling intimidated. This is that becomes something else entirely. And so right now, if we're working with our partners, we're monitoring the cases at the federal level to see um, that are playing out in the courts across the country to see what that relationship looks like between the local, statewide, and local election authorities and the federal government, and where that's going. I will say that fingers crossed, knock on wood, if I had salt, I'd throw it over my shoulder. But right now we are in Lake County, Illinois. I think if there was an appetite for that type of enforcement action on election day or near election day at polling sites, there would be, the capacity is very limited, and so the federal government would have to, I think, be strategic in the areas that they choose. And personally, I believe that I don't think we would be in that high priority. Um, Again, things change and things will change rapidly if it does evolve, and so we will continue to work with our local partners and statewide partners on addressing this issue should it get there. Which is why you should always follow our social media pages. If there's any announcements that we will push out as much as possible, we've relied on partners like the league to push out certain information. And should it become at a critical level, then we will continue to rely on those partners to push that information out to the public. Um, the other item heading into 2026 is that uh, during the municipal election in 25 is we pivoted to vote centers. Before the standard way of voting on election day is that you had to attend your assigned neighborhood polling site to cast your ballot. That is no longer the case. Every single site in Lake County can take care of any Lake County registered voter. So we're able to print the ballot on demand. So if you work if you live in Grace Lake, but you work in Fox Lake or in Waukegan, like I live in Grace Lake, I work in Waukegan. I can go on election day to a Waukegan site, and we have the capability of printing my voter specific ballot at that site, and we'd be able to cast it. And so what that does is that eliminates voter confusion. We know that a lot of voters don't vote in every election. Some voters only vote every presidential. Some voters, like I imagine all of you, vote every single election. So if your sites change or not. But the lower propensity voter that votes every other election or what have you, they're only going to remember their last site that they went to, and that may not even be an active site. And so we're, usually about 10, I believe 10 or 12%, don't quote me on that exactly, of election day voters were redirected because they showed up to the wrong one. And so what this does is that cuts that out completely, and we can print their specific ballot on site. We're still assigning your preferred voting site on your voter card, or if you log into Voter Power on our website, we're still assigning you your preferred site. That always reminds me of like Jewel Osco, your preferred card. We're still assigning you your preferred site, and that would be your neighborhood polling site, but you can use any one in Lake County that's convenient to you, whether it's close to work, to school, or whether you're running around last minute doing family things and you're like, you know what, this is my only shot. I'm gonna go right here. that will make it work. Um, and the other big item as we head into 2026, which I'm sure you've all read something about already, are the changes to the United States Postal Service, specifically the postmark issue. Um, but this really goes beyond the postmark issue. And so I will preface this that um, the United States Postal Service finally defined what a postmark is and where it is applied. That's a good thing. Before, it was a bit more nuanced, and so the definition is a good thing. The issue that I have operationally when it comes to our elections is what follows. What they also stated was that the postmark is now being applied at the processing facilities. So our processing facility here is in Carroll Stream. So there is now the reality is that the postmark is no longer an indicator of when the piece of mail was taken into custody by the United States Postal Service. It is now an indication of when they have processed it at their processing facility. And there's a big distinction here. Um, if you put a piece of mail in the mailbox today, it may not get postmarked until 2 to 3 days from now. In a perfect world, it will be postmarked the following day. But um, we've all had that experience where we put something in the mailbox and it's been postmarked a couple of days later. And so that's the issue. Illinois is a postmarked state, meaning that we have to count ballots postmarked by election day, even if they arrive up to 2 weeks after election day. As long as that March 17th date is on the return vote by mail ballot, we're able to count it. The problem, as you can already see, is that if voters are waiting to the last minute and are not putting their vote by mail ballot in the mailbox until the day before election day, or maybe even on election day, we cannot guarantee that those ballots will be counted because it will be dependent on the date of the postmark. This does create complications. The second part to that is that the post office is also reducing the number of pickup routes that they have. Historically, we could rely on a morning pickup and an afternoon pickup. They're only doing a morning pickup. So what does that mean is for Lake County, I'm still trying to confirm when the morning pickup is. Presumably, it's first thing in the morning, all the mail that was collected the day before that would be on its way first thing in the morning to the processing facility. I'm still trying to get confirmation. I don't have that piece of information yet. But what does that mean is again, that pickup means that we have at least a 24-hour delay. And I'm hopeful that once the mail is received by the processing facility, they'll begin to immediately process it. So I don't know if it's a 24 or 48-hour delay. Still trying to get confirmation. The third piece that ties into all of this is that for every single election since the since for generations, the United States Postal Service has employed extraordinary measures when it came to election mail. We received priority status every single time. That meant that postal employees would do more runs to our offices to deliver vote by mail ballots if they had any in their possession. Again, extraordinary measures. They went above and beyond for election mail. That is no longer happening. Moving forward, we will not receive those extraordinary measures unless it is a general November election. So your primaries, your municipal elections will no longer receive that status. So for us, you're talking about even if we're able to receive the ballots on time, you're talking about delayed processing on our end simply because they're not getting to us in much quicker, in a regular, quicker priority turnaround time. Which means that when you're talking about close races, contested races that are going to come down to a few hundred votes or even less, as we've seen in some consolidated elections in Lake County, is that really we're going to have to wait the 2 weeks. And quite frankly, for voters that wait last minute, we cannot guarantee that their vote will be counted if they use the United States Postal Service. For well over a century, the Postal Service has been a critical partner to election authorities across the country to ensure the delivery of vote by mail ballots. The United States Postal Service got us through the Civil War, the election that happened, the presidential election in the Civil War because of their delivery to the front line to Union troops. And so now we're in a position where that relationship is being strained operationally. And when voters find out that their vote was not counted, they're not going to blame the Postal Service. They're going to be looking at me and saying, you disenfranchised my vote. When the reality is that it didn't get into our hand until it was too late, which is why we are increasing our messaging regarding vote by mail. We are recommending all voters return their vote by mail ballot, those that requested them, at least a week ahead of time. If you're waiting to send it back within a week of election day, we're actually asking you to go to a drop box or to go to a USPS retail location and asking them for a manual postmark at the counter. That being said, I had one voter last election who went to the Libertyville post office location and they refused because they said they don't do that there. Now, she didn't tell me this on election day because if we had gotten that call in our office on election day, we would have called and elevated the situation and said, "Hey, that is something that you do. Like it is you stamp manual postmarks in mail." Um, she told me this about a month later, so unfortunately, I don't believe she actually was able to get it to a Dropbox in time that night to be able to actually cast her ballot in that consolidated municipal election. And so that is something that we are increasing that communication on. Last week on Thursday, I joined a bipartisan group of county clerks in Peoria for a press conference to raise awareness. We've also started to meet with the congressional delegation in Illinois, asking them for their help to increase pressure on the Postal Service. We know this is, this conversation is going to be long term, but one of the first things that we can do, and that at least I'm asking for, is for the Postal Service to give us that priority status back, to at least employ extraordinary measures in the short term, and then we can have a wider conversation about what the actual long-term solution is going to be moving forward when it comes to elections. It doesn't bode well when the postmark rule went into effect. At least we were notified on Christmas Eve, December 24th. And it doesn't bode well that on New Year's Eve, the Postal Service called for a statewide Illinois call with election authorities at 2:30 p.m. to let us know of the operational changes that were going to go into effect on January 1st. Um, and so that doesn't, it's not a good sign. I know we'll say one of the reasons I have not been able to confirm the pickup for Lake County and how that's gonna go is because to this day they have not returned any of my phone calls or emails. They have not returned formal communication to my counterparts in other parts of the state. So we're working through that through our congressional representatives to see if they can put pressure on them. I'm sure they didn't like that we're holding, press conferences and doing our own communication to voters. But what I would point out to the Postal Service is that we're doing what was indicated on that call. They told us that it was our job to educate the voter, and that's what we're doing. And we will continue to do so to make sure that every ballot is counted. Our commitment remains the same. Our commitment remains that we will ensure that every voter has information so that they can feel confident in casting their ballot in a way that's convenient to them and in the manner that they choose. This is just another challenge, and election authorities will once again, rise to that challenge. We were able to get through COVID. We were able to get up through almost everything, and we will continue. That commitment to our democracy is still there, and we will work with our partners like the League of Women Voters to educate our electorate on what they need to do to be prepared ahead of election day. Um, and so with that, I'm looking at some of the um, I am looking at some of the questions that were pre-submitted and to make sure that I capture everything. Um, yeah, I think I mentioned the first question was how will voting by mail work with postmarks being inaccurate? I just kind of went over that already. Why is vote by mail under such attack? Look, I think there is a portion of people who believe that vote by mail is fraud ridden, except there's a lot of checks and balances at the local level to make sure that that we maintain that high integrity. It's not just a ballot in an envelope. You're talking about a very concrete audit trail in the technology that's embedded in the envelopes and in the ballot, which is then double and triple checked before we even send it out to the voter. And by the time we get it, it's processed. And the fact is um, that we have election judges still checking every single signature that is on the return envelope to make sure it matches the voter file. And I will say that um, my signature challenge rate for 2024 was pretty high compared to other elections because we're in a point where a lot of people are signing up for permanent vote by mail, and it's easier for their spouse. They're sitting down together and they're voting together, and Sally tells Bill, "Hey, go to the drop box. Oh, she forgot to sign her return envelope. I know her signature. I'm gonna sign," and yet we know because it's vastly different. And so, for people who sometimes say, the vote by mail is written with fraud, if you ask the few thousand people whose signature was challenged every single election, they'll beg to differ because they clog up my lines and my emails saying that we're disenfranchising them because. And I said, well, your signature didn't match, and it could be for many different reasons. And the other follow-up question to that is how do we double check new registered voters are American citizens? This is a very apt question. Um, the law in Illinois is that if you are a U.S. citizen, if you're registering to vote, you are attesting. It's a key word. You are attesting that you are a U.S. citizen. We don't require documentary proof of citizenship. We do during the registration process. We ask you for your last four digits of your social security number. However, that's not an indicator of citizenship status, I will say. We ask for your ID number, and that is cross-checked on the back end. And usually on the back end, that's where we know that yes, citizen. Um, However, I will point out that the real ID requirement that went into effect earlier in 2025 um, is also not an indicator of U.S. citizenship. So there's some folks that are like, you get your real ID that proves you're a U.S. citizen. It actually does not. It just proves that your identity was verified. Whether it's a U.S. citizenship identity or not, it is not an indicator of citizenship. I will say that for any person that is hopeful to become a U.S. citizen at some point, this is one of the disqualifiers. If they were to go through that process and USCIS determines that they register to vote, that is a disqualifier. You're not supposed to do that. There are very minor instances across the country, super minority, where it's happened, and oftentimes in those cases, it it was an error. It wasn't intentional, and it was oftentimes a bureaucratic error. However, this is in Illinois. We are attesting that we are citizens. You know that, and if you're lying, now you're committing perjury at minimum. If you end up trying to vote, now you're committing fraud, and that would be, prosecuted when it would be eventually found out. The number four. Provide a step-by-step review of the actions after the polls close, emphasis on the ballots and envelopes deposited in the drop boxes or mail-in ballots. Okay, so bits of a nuance there. At the polls, on election day polls, after the polls close and all the voters are out, they begin the breakdown process. There's many different processes there, and I would probably bore all of you with every single detail, but essentially the big thing is we do ballot accounting. We have to make sure that every ballot, when you go in to vote, you check in on a tablet, you're given your ballot, and then you put in a tabulator. We have part of our ballot accounting process is making sure that the voters that we processed on those tablets on the poll books match the number of ballots that were actually cast in the tabulator. Now, we, in case you spoil your ballot, in case you are issued a provisional ballot, those are also accounted separately. And so therefore we know for provisional ballots, those are not cast in the tabulator. They're actually secured because they have to be adjudicated in the office by election judges after the election. So we have those secured at the polling site. If it's spoiled, we have those also on site, and so we can account for that. And so we want to make sure that the numbers match. And then after that, it's the printing of the reports. The tabulator where you submit your ballot after you vote, you usually see a long receipt printer like hanging off the edge when you're voting. And that's the zero report at the top of election day before we even open. We have to run the report to show that there were zero votes in those machines for that election. And so what subsequently happens after we close the election is the results are printed in that receipt paper, in a very, very, very long receipt paper that all of our election judges really, really, really love because they have to wait until it's finishing printing, and then after that they can finish with their closing procedures. That's for election day. It's a very skinny version. For the drop boxes, we have staff at every single external drop box on election day. They get there at 6:45 p.m. At 7 p.m., they lock the drop box and they take custody of the ballots in the drop box, and they're sealed in a container until they are brought back to the county building. We've had a situation where a voter rolled up at 7:01 and said, "Here's my ballot." And we've had to tell that voter, "I am so sorry. We legally can no longer take your ballot. It's 7:01. Polls are closed. You just rolled up. I'm so sorry." Maybe seen as a maybe that's a bit harsh, but the reality is if that wouldn't be accepted at the polling site, we cannot do that in a parking lot at one of our Dropbox locations. We have to maintain the integrity of the election, and that means, at 7 o'clock on the dot, we're locking the Dropbox, preventing further ballots to be inserted. They take custody and they go straight back to Waukegan to turn custody over to our team here at Central Count. And mail-in ballots, again, we have late arriving vote by mail. As long as they're postmarked by election day, we can proceed to count them. Of course, as long as the signature matches, and that is actually postmark. One question I always get is, well, what happens when a postmark is missing? Sometimes it does happen that a postmark is missing and it went through the postal service and it's actually delivered by the postal service. In that case, the law says that we have to go by the date of certification. If you vote by mail and you sign, there is a date field underneath the signature right next to it. That's the certification affidavit. So if there is no postmark, we can go by the certification date. So if the certification date is on or before election day, then we're able to proceed and count that ballot. Again, with the changes in the postal service, I am encouraging voters, if they're going to return it within 1 week of election day, to go Dropbox or I go to a retail location, a postal service retail location, and actually request a manual postmark, just to ensure that it's counted. You voters also have a third. You have actually two more options. They can drop it. They can drop it in person at my office in Waukegan, or they can go to an early voting location or an election day location and surrender their vote by mail ballot, and they'll get an extra ballot right then and there after they surrendered it, so they can actually cast their ballot. Um, I have spoken for nearly 35 minutes, which, I could probably continue on without interruption for another 35, if not more. But I know that it is Wednesday evening, and but I would love to take some questions. I do love the back and forth. So if there are any other questions in the chat, or I guess you can raise your arm, and I can also take, right, Rosemary? I can take
Right.
those.
Well, what I did, I gave everybody back permission to unmute yourselves because so far it looks like an orderly crowd. So unless we have somebody rowdy and we have to take away the privilege again, if you'd like to use the raise hand icon on the bottom, then oh, and we're going to still record the question and answers. So often I stop recording when it's a Q&A so people can express their opinions, but this is not an opinion. This is just people asking questions. So we'll continue to record the Q&A. So you will be on the video on YouTube, just so you know. Elaine, yes, you have to unmute. And we'd love to see your face too. But you're still muted, Elaine. There she is.
Elaine, you're still muted.
Oh, yep, she's still. Oh, she froze there for a minute. Uh,
Sick.
there she
Sorry.
goes.
Do you have any concern about electronic interference and the cutbacks on the support from the federal level since budgets and employees have been cut at the federal level?
Look, cybersecurity concerns are always a concern, especially since they always evolve. The cyber threat landscape is constantly evolving, and they're getting very sophisticated. Um, I am concerned. However, a good sign is the fact that this Congress just released increased HAVA funding, so that's Helping America Vote Act funding, specifically for elections, and that goes. And that those monies could be used for a lot of different things. Um, that was a really big surprise for us because um, historically, in the last few years, that type of funding has been on the chopping block. In the fall of last year, I joined about 200 other election authorities in DC to lobby Congress, and we think obviously that it worked because they actually, I believe they doubled the funding for in that bill that they announced last week. I will say that. It's always a concern when CISA is a cyber intelligence system agency that gives a lot of cybersecurity protection to the support to the local election authorities. It was concerning initially when their funding got cut. However, in Illinois, we have in the last 10 years really had developed a really robust cybersecurity program. In Lake County, we have a really good cybersecurity program. I work closely with our county IT departments. They have really increased those cyber protections. And really, CISA was meant to support the smaller jurisdictions that do not have the funding or the capability at the local level to do it on their own. We do. We would always obviously say, yes, we'll take more funding because then we can always do more. But I am also very confident in our county IT's cybersecurity expertise. Um, my IT supervisor that handles our election systems, he's new, but his experience is in military IT infrastructure. Like that's exactly what we're looking for in the new age of in the new age of elections. And so we have, the good thing. In my short answer is at the local level, we're filling the gap that the federal level is leaving. But I will give credit where credit is due, is in terms of the funding increasing from the federal level. This year, we were very surprised. I'm very happy with it, and I think that's a good indication of what the priority of this Congress is for the new year.
Okay, thank you. Good question, Elaine. Somebody else. Joni, let's see, where is she? Uh,
I'm here waiting,
okay,
coming.
there,
Okay, well,
there,
I don't see start video. Okay, here I
yeah,
am.
there she
So,
is. Okay.
hi. So my question is that are you planning on, or would you consider putting some of the comments onto the ballot regarding suggested dates to get it in the mail, as well as suggested options for putting it in a drop box, et cetera, et cetera,
On the mail-in ballots, you mean?
on the mail-in ballot?
Mhm.
Well, yes, on the mail-in ballots.
So it's not going to be in the ballot, because what goes on the actual ballot is strictly prescribed by the Illinois Election Code. What I have control over are the instructions and everything that comes in the envelope. And luckily, this happened at a point where we were able to actually insert language in the Dropbox location pamphlet and the instructions for vote by mail, so that language is included there. But on the ballot itself,
No,
that's
that's fine.
yeah.
That's what I meant. Thank
We
you. That's
I we
wonderful.
Yeah, we are also recommending, if you're voting by mail, sign up for ballot tracks if you haven't done so already. That sends you notifications about on each step of the way of where your ballot is. My plan is 2 weeks before Election Day, we're actually going to send a communication via ballot tracks, which you'll get via text or email or both, saying, hey, if you have not returned your vote by mail ballot, now's the time to put it in the mail. Otherwise, go in person at a post office or use a drop box. Again, we'll use every tool at our disposal to try and educate our voters and remind voters to return their ballot with enough time.
And is that ballot tracks registration on your website? Is that where that is?
It is. It's also going to be in the instructions. If you don't do it tonight, you can also when you get your ballot, the instructions
Got
will
it.
be there.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Joni and David. Anybody else? Um, how about voter turnout? Anything, we try to, the league, that's a big thing to us is voter turnout. Any suggestions?
Yeah, look, other than a few congressional races and maybe one county board race in Lake County, there's not that many contested races. I think contested races sometimes drive turnout.
Yes.
There's a lot of people that don't want to choose either Democratic or Republican ballot. They just want to vote in the general, and that's their right. And so I think turnout for the primary in Lake County will be generally lower. Um, we know that a gubernatorial election typically is about 50% turnout. Um, in the presidential election, we held steady at almost 71% voter turnout.
Oh,
We held steady compared to 2020, whereas other counties in the Chicagoland area saw a decrease in turnout during the presidential election. I think part of it, what I will say is that in 2025, during the consolidated election, we actually had, it could be better, but it was, I believe, 18 or 19% voter turnout for that municipal election. But it was the highest in over 15 years in Lake County.
oh,
So
wow.
let's take the little wins. So we know we have a lot more
Mhm.
work to do. And I think when we make voting easier and accessible, I think that flows naturally. But I also think we got to do a lot more education as to what's on the ballot for turnout.
Very good. And here's Elaine again. It's got another one. Glad you're with us today.
Well, one reason to vote that I'm telling people is we have the opportunity to elect a new U.S. Senator, which we haven't had in years. And there are many people running for that office. So the primary is really important. I have another question. In Lake County, do you allow mail-in ballots to be collected at the voting locations? Is there like a little box, like a drop box at every voting polling place?
During early voting only. During early voting,
Okay,
any voter can use an internal Dropbox at those sites, and those are picked up every day by staff. On election day, you have to use an external Dropbox.
right. Well, that's another reason to vote early. I think that I'm in DuPage County, but we do that. We've done that since COVID, and that was an easy way to avoid any worries about delays by the Postal Service, because it was kind of questionable during those times if they would be fully staffed, whether it would be given a priority. So I think having a drop box at early voting does two things: makes it more convenient, and it also makes people get their ballot in early.
100%. And I see, Mary, you had a question?
I had a couple questions.
Sure.
If we would go to the post office and discover that they wouldn't hand stamp our ballot, would it be helpful to call your office and alert you right away?
100%. Yes, please. I'd like to know which location, so we can address it. We can also reach out to them. The more information I have on the front end, the better, versus, after the election's over and everything's been certified. But yes.
Okay. Would it be of any help if we called our state or federal representatives about the mail situation, or is that pretty much a done deal at this point?
If you were inclined to call your congressperson, or your U.S. senator, my ask is tell the post office to give election mail priority status.
Okay.
That is to me, the immediate solution that they could employ to to mitigate against any of the other issues. That's a longer term conversation with them, but the immediate is like, give us that, employ extraordinary measures for US for election mail.
And then finally, are you able to comment on the SAVE Act? Do you see that or are you not able to weigh in on that? I don't know if you're able to weigh in on that.
The Safeguarding American Voter Eligibility Act is a piece of legislation that was proposed in Congress, that would require documentary proof of citizenship at the time of voter registration or updating your voter registration. So what does that mean? Documentary proof of citizenship is either your birth certificate from a local jurisdiction, your passport. The bill itself is very, I don't want to say broad. The bill itself has a lot of strict provisions. What the issue with that, for example, is that, one, what does it, a lot of millions of Americans do not have a US passport. So they're going to have to rely on their birth certificate. The issue with that then becomes, if you are a female or a person who's married with another person and you've changed your name. You can change your name, but on your birth certificate, it's still your birth name. That's the big issue in terms of access. The other issue with that particular bill is that it actually levies criminal penalties on election officials, if we get it wrong. So if we don't administer it properly, you can get criminally penalized for it. It would also really do away with voter registration drives, kind of like what the League of Women Voter does and a lot of other civic engagement groups, because again, if you don't do it right, you're going to get criminally prosecuted for it. And that provision still does not it still requires the voter to actually go in person to the election office and show proof of their citizenship. So and what we've seen is other states, um, because it failed in Congress once, so it was introduced in the last session, and I believe it passed the House, but it didn't go anywhere in the Senate. But other states have mirrored and passed their own pieces of state level legislation, um, and it's resulted in disenfranchisement. We saw Connecticut when they employed it in 2025. You had college students that were not able to vote because of their residency or their documentary proof of citizenship. You had a woman who actually was interviewed by a newspaper, and said I had everything they could have asked for except my blood type, and I wasn't able to vote. Or you had people that spent hours going back and forth between their house to get the actual proof that they needed. And so the question is, if we're going to do something like this, and my position is, my job is to administer the law. I will do what I have to do to administer the law that is passed by Congress and the state, but give us the opportunity to opine on the practicality of applying the law in our day to day. This SAVE Act does not solve the problem. It actually increases the bureaucracy and inundates our offices with paperwork that, in a way, we may be set up to fail in that regard, because it's not going to solve the issue that they're trying to solve. There's better ways, I think, to address it. You're talking about access to proof of citizenship. Illinois, we make it. Look, I'll give you a perfect example. May 7th was the first day, right, that you had to have a real ID if you were going to travel. Our vitals offices were inundated with requests for birth certificates. Between those 5 months, January 1st, 2025 and May, we saw a 10,000 increase in vital record requests, because everyone from across the country was trying to get their actual certificate, and so now they lost it, whatever. So now they're requesting it from the county that they were born in, and it was a lot of staff time. That's just like a quick view of what will happen if we pass a law that requires a birth certificate for voter registration. And so I think there's better ways to do what the intent of that piece of law is. I just hope that they take into account the opinion of the election authorities that would be in charge of administering that law. I hope I answered your question.
You did, and we've got 2 missions then we have to call about priority status for mail-in voting, and also that we don't care for the SAVE Act is not practical. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And along that line, Sunday, are you able to speak yet?
Yes, I think I can.
Oh,
Can
we
you hear
hear
me?
you.
All
Excellent.
right. Can you all see me? All
Yes.
my toys for my
Yeah.
granddaughter.
This is Sunday. I'm going to introduce you. Sunday Mueller is our membership chairman, and also has spearheaded our league doing what are called drop-ins for democracy. So we have these brief meetings once a month on different advocacy topics where the people who attend actually write a postcard or a letter or do some action after the information. So Sunday, I'll turn it to you to tell about our next program.
Well, I don't know about that, but I do have a question. Sometimes people want to get involved in the election process, the public. What kinds of in what way can ordinary people, if they take the training, help? Obviously, election judges. I don't know if there's anything beyond that, or what your needs might be.
Yeah, look, election judge work is something that is a first step. When I was in high school, I served as a high school student election judge. When I was in graduate school, I was a site coordinator for the Chicago Board of Elections during the 2016 primary, and that led me to the next phase, which is what people can do. So if you can't serve as an election judge, You can work with either candidates that you prefer, with a party that you prefer, or with other civic groups and become a poll watcher and make sure that people's rights are protected. And what that means is you're literally poll watching. You're in the polls and you're observing the process, and that's something that can be done. Beyond that, I one of the easiest things you can do is share accurate information about elections to your circles. I always see different information floating out that's wrong, and I know the person means well, but sometimes I think we with social media and access to technology, I think our reaction is hit the share button without verifying. So before you share something, verify the information, or more better yet, share it from the actual source. Share it from the Illinois State Board of Elections. Share it from our official social media channels, or share our newsletters. Because a lot of national groups, they have a lot of information they're pulling from, and sometimes they don't get it right. They may mean well, but they're not going to get it right because each state does it differently. And so that's something that I think that's an easy thing to do, is just share accurate information straight from the source.
Thank you. And did you want to say anything about our next drop-in? Because we were thinking of following up on Anthony's program, but we really hadn't
Right.
coordinated it yet.
No, we haven't. We actually were kind of interested in this, finding out the information that you had, particularly on the mail-in ballots and all of that. So, so part of that next meeting will be sharing some of the detailed information that you've given to us, and perhaps writing postcards and asking for the priority mail service to be reinstated, and things of that nature. So we may follow up with you with another question or two before now and February 21st, when we're planning that meeting, but we do want to help people prepare for the election.
And you want to tell people where it's going to be on February 21st and what time?
Well, it's going to be at the library, Deerfield Public Library. It's been very helpful. Our library's been great in allowing us to come at least once a month. And it's, as I recall, it's Wednesday. No, it's a Saturday, and it's at 1:00. So
Excellent. Thank you, Sunday.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Let me get this off. I'm gonna jump the line, Mary, and I want to announce that I just went to a League of Women Voter poll watching training yesterday online, and there's a lot of interest in the state league to get our league members to be trained as poll watchers. So it's kind of like, correct me if I'm wrong, Anthony, it's kind of like the way we do deputy registrars. We're the civic organization that's recognized, and then our members would go for a poll watcher training, and then the president of the organization has to sign off on them, and they're only good for a certain voting site. There are a lot of rules and regulations, but you don't have to sit there all day like you do as a judge. You can go for a few hours. You can go near the end, you can go near the beginning. Do you want to talk about poll watching a little bit for us, Anthony?
Yeah. So poll watching, yes, if you're doing it under qualified civic organization, you have to get a credential. Usually the civic organization requests the credential from the election office. And it's like an index card. It has my seal, it has my signature, but also the executive of that organization also signs off saying yes, and D. Gillespie is one of our poll watchers. And so what happens is, if you're going to 5, I know a lot of different groups will give you a route. You'll spend time at maybe 5 or 6 locations, or even, and so you'll get 5 or 6 of them, because you got to turn it in at each location. You hand in a new credential. And then after that, after you do your initial round, some orgs will deploy you to where they think it's needed. Otherwise, you pick your location that you are comfortable at, and all you do is just watch. You can ask questions of the election judges. Again, questions that doesn't turn into obstruction of the process. You can make your observations. If there's something funny that you see, you can always ask clarifying questions. If you're still not satisfied, that's when you would elevate it to your to whoever they want you to elevate things to. And sometimes what happens is they'll call me, they'll call my director of civic engagement, who's the director of elections, and to see if there's any issue, and then we attempt to resolve it. Sometimes, more often than not, it's well, we do have a robust election judge training. Sometimes judges are a bit rusty, and so we have to retrain them on the job, or just again remind them certain things. For the most part, very minute. I'm trying to remember if there were some of the routine issues. If a voter comes in, sometimes if they're inactive in our system because we received indication that they may have moved, that's the only time they're asked for 2 pieces of ID. And so sometimes poll watchers ask, well, why are you asking ID for this person? And then the judge will explain, well, it's because they're actually inactive in the voter registration system. The clerk's office would have received notification that they potentially could have moved. And so that's to become active again, you got to show 2 pieces of ID. And so stuff like that, just educating the poll watchers so they understand the process. It's a I did it for many years when I came to Lake County. It's a good thing to do. It reinforces the checks and balances that exist within our electoral system. And I think if you're able to do it, you should consider doing it, whether it's for half a day or the entire day, and you can experience what that is like without having the pressure of processing voters.
And if there are more than one precinct at a polling place, you need a separate credential for each one, right?
No,
No? Okay.
no. You
Oh,
know,
good.
it's because we're all vote centers. As
Oh,
long
the
as
voting center. Okay, right.
Yeah, so
Right.
if is we just need your name and your
Mhm.
address. But if you're inactive, you do need 2 pieces of ID to have your address.
Yeah. No, I mean, as a poll watcher, you don't need separate credentials if they're because you have voting
Oh,
centers, you don't have precincts. Okay, so that's
so it's
Mary,
one per location, yeah.
one per location. Okay, Mary,
I'm
put you
just
back up.
asking a kind of a theoretical question. Um, as it seems more and more people are having problems with dementia or Alzheimer's, how do you handle that, or don't you?
That is we've actually gotten that question. I've gotten that question. I've almost like once a year, almost like clockwork. Look, if the person is able to respond to our election judges, that, what is your name? They know who they are. What is your address? They know their address. The law says that's really, and they're able to sign their name and the signature matches. Those are the only qualifiers. We're not there to conduct, a test of some sort. Um, it is to a small degree, it is a judgment call. But if I'm being processed and I'm saying that my name is Anthony Vega and this is my address, that's very different from me saying my name is Tony, and then having somebody nudge me and say, you got to say Vega now. Oh yeah, I'm Tony Vega. That's very different. Those are 2 different scenarios. We always tell our judges, if you come across a scenario that makes you uncomfortable, you have questions about, you call our office and we will guide them through the process. But as far as we're concerned, are they able to say who they are? Are they able to articulate their address? Are they able to sign and that signature matches what's on the file? That primarily that is an indicator that they have the mental capacity to be able to fill out the ballot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
It's a really
question.
good question.
Any others before we close up? It's about 8:05. Anthony, do you have any closing remarks that you'd like to share? You can talk as long as you want because people can leave if they want to, but they're not leaving.
If I do that, then I'm going to be the last one in the room talking to myself. We don't want that, right? Uh,
Okay.
the only thing I would say is, look, really, thank you for your continuing commitment to civic engagement, to our electoral process. We, as election authorities, cannot do what we do without organizations like the League, without people like you who care about civic engagement and who help us spread the word that even though we've been facing many challenges as a country when it comes to elections, we know that elections are resilient, they are secure, because our framers, our founding fathers, had the foresight to have a decentralized election model where it's handled at the local level and not by one federal entity. And that is my takeaway whenever I speak, is that the cornerstone of our democracy is that fact that we have a decentralized election system, and we're able to show our work. And democracy works when people are engaged. And so thank you for being part of that movement and keeping our democracy alive.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. I'm going to stop the recording. Let's see.